There's not much to say today except that it's cold out and just here looking around. I have a nice authentic historic relic here of Neil Armstrong. Yeah, pretty cool. Uh, from my eternal and yeah, it's one of them days where you go outside and it's windy and wind chill factor. I think I'm picking up a cold or got the runny nose. And I was reading a book on George Washington, and I picked up at the library. Pretty good little book. It's a biography for children, and but it's nice to read. George Washington, uh, the Steuben trains American troops at Valley Forge, and the Redcoats and the American both suffered heavy losses when Washington tried to duplicate his victory at Trenton with a raid at Germantown, Pennsylvania. It's got a picture, a drawing here of the Marquis de Lafayette. Was only 19 years old when Congress made him a major general. Can you imagine that? 19 years old and a general in the American Revolution. But Washington found him a skilled advisor in camp and a bold leader in the battleship, Lafayette. And so I have my medical treatment. Getting cured in Washington's day could be even worse than getting sick. Standard practices included draining much of a patient's blood or giving medicines to force vomiting. Doctors didn't know about germs and antiseptics, so wounds that hadn't seemed deadly on the battlefield often became dangerously infected. And there's another drawing here. A doctor treats a fallen soldier's wounds with painstaking, pain-killing anesthetics not yet invented. A patient's only relief during surgery was to bite hard on a bullet. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that? And okay, Steuben trains American troops at Valley Forge. Uh, I was reading something about soldiers being trained by Bill O'Reilly some time ago, and they weren't trained. They needed somebody there to help them, and I think they brought this guy over from France, and he was a real good uh, soldier or captain, whatever he was, that could really train. And he's the one that got the soldiers at Valley Forge to train for war, and it really helped out. And it says here that where is that? Bill O'Reilly has a good article on it, but I don't know where that book is at right now. I know I have it somewhere. Sir Henry Clinton, I wonder if he's related to Bill Clinton, focused the British war efforts on the American South and battled Washington as little as he possibly could. It talks about Court Martial to court martials is to put soldiers or sailors on trial before a military court of law. That's where it started. And there is a picture of Washington stops Lee's retreat and rallies American troops and Monmouth. Espionage. Throughout the Revolution, Washington relied on extensive network of spies ranging from farmers to merchants to washerwomen. The general used his spies both to scout out information on British plans and troop movements and to feed the enemy false information and misleading rumors about his army. This is a little book here. See it? Yeah, I found it. I think it was a Goodwill or somewhere. I don't remember. Something to read on. Sentries found this pass, signed by Benedict Arnold, hidden in Major Andre's shoe. This here right there. Can you see that? Not good, right? And treason. Treason is a crime of deliberately betraying one's own country. Benedict Arnold, one of America's finest officers, stunned Washington by plotting to hand West Point over to the British. Espionage. Throughout the Revolution, Washington relied on an extensive network of spies. Okay, I already read that. I will not be believed. All 13 states, as well as the Continental Congress, printed their own worthless money, paper money, during the Revolution. Wow, talking about counterfeits. And Count Rochambeau and Washington didn't trust each other at first, but working together, they defeated the British. That's Count Rochambeau. All right. There's Washington. Lord Cornwallis disagreed with King George's politics in America, but he loyally and brutally carried them out. Lord Cornwallis disagreed with King George's politics in America. And here is a plan, so map on the colonies. It's about Washington and Rochambeau's army were well on their way to Yorktown by the time British forces in New York realized that they had been faked out. Whoa. And the British surrender at Yorktown assured American independence. Wow. The noose kept tightening until the British guns were silenced and Cornwall capitulated. On October 19, 1781, some 8,000 British soldiers filed out of the battled fortress. Sarah Osborne, who cooked and cleaned for the Continental while married to a corporal, described how the British Army marched out, beating and playing a melancholy tune, their drums covered with black handkerchiefs and their fifis with black ribbons tied around them. The legend that British musician played a tune called "The World Turned Upside Down" is probably too good to be true. Cornwallis, too proud or too embarrassed to surrender personally to Washington, sent a general to hand over his sword. Washington returned the insult by having General Benjamin Lincoln, whom Clinton humiliated at Charleston, accepted. For the first time since the war had started, Washington felt he could take some time off, but the vacation wasn't a happy one. Jackie Custis had taken sick almost as he arrived in Yorktown, then died at the age of 27 a few weeks after the siege ended. Washington didn't know it yet, but the war had seen its last major battle. Parliament didn't want to keep pouring money into a losing cause. Uh, Lord North resigned as Prime Minister, and King George agreed to recognize American independence. That's good. Finally, they realized that it was costing too much money to support this war. They lived so far away, they just started running out of money and soldiers, and it was just ridiculous. They should have just given the colonies away a long time ago without a sword a sword picked up. Washington told General Greene that anything historians wrote about the revolution would be regarded as fiction. For he will not believe that such a force as Great Britain has employed could be baffled by numbers infinitely less, composed of men oftentimes half starved, always in rags, without pay, and experiencing at times every species of distress which human nature is capable of undergoing. General Clinton was replaced by yet another commander as the Redcoats remained in New York City. For 2 more years, while peace negotiations dragged on, Washington had to keep his army together and close enough to keep an eye on the Redcoats. But Congress and the states were less interested than ever in paying for it now that the British threat was over. Washington was told to send most of his troops home without the pay that had been promised. That's crazy, right? And then there was the Treaty of Paris. John Adams and Benjamin Franklin spent many months in France negotiating a peace treaty to officially end the American Revolution. Britain recognized American independence and agreed to U.S. boundaries south of Canada, north of the Spanish Florida, and east of the Mississippi River. The United States, in turn, agreed to honor old debts to British and restore property that had been confiscated from the Loyalists. Washington was embarrassed about needing glasses, and many of his officers had never seen him wear them. Well, with independence won after 8 long years, Washington and his officers prepared to go their separate ways. Mules born to a mother horse and a father donkey can't have babies themselves. Washington is credited with introducing widespread use of mules to American farms. I didn't know that. The back entrance of Mount Vernon was as striking as the front. Must have been a real beautiful house. It's still around, I think. I've been to Maryland, but I never went around to Vermont to go see it. When falls tears like this, it's no wonder that Washington is seldom painted with a smile on his face. Whoa. See that? See that? That's funny, right? All this is from this book. So, you see that? That little book. Yeah, I'm just reading up for this book. It's called George Washington, A Photographic Story of a Life by Lenny Hort. Okay. All right, folks, that's all I have right now for you guys. Oh, did you know that Washington first appeared on the dollar bill in 1869? Did you know that? I didn't know that. And on the quarter in 1932. Wow. 1869, the dollar bill, and 1932, the quarter. Okay. The Washington Monument rises 555 feet to tower above the nation's capital. The monument was first proposed in Washington within days of Washington's death, but work wasn't begun until 1848 and wasn't completed until 1888. I guess money was scarce then, right? That's why it took so long to build it. Washington slept here. Ooh, there's a lot of places he slept. And there's the events in the life of George Washington. George Washington. Let me see here. Okay. In January 6, 1759, George marries Martha Dandridge. Custis and settles at Mount Vernon with Martha and her two children. February 22nd, 1732, George Washington is born in Westmoreland County, Virginia. In May through July 1754, Washington's ambush of French ensign Jumonville and defeat at Fort Necessity are the first skirmishes in the French and Indian War. And there's a whole list, there's a timeline here. Very interesting. Okay, thank you folks. Maybe next time.